In today's video, we'll be discussing how you can create your very own isekai, manga, comic, or light novel. So let's take a look at some of the key elements that go into creating a really good isekai, manga, comic, or light novel. The first thing you want to do is you want to know your subgenres. Isekai can cover a wide variety of subgenres, so before you begin creating your isekai series, you first want to know what genres you're working with. Some of the most commonly paired genres alongside isekai include fantasy, science fiction, and video games. But of course, many genres can be combined with isekai, and I recommend trying different genres or researching genres in the series you watch to see which genres you enjoy the best in order to include those genres in the series you're creating. You also want to create a world that your readers would really want to explore. After all, isekai is all about characters being transported to another world, so therefore you actually want this world to be interesting to read about. There are some main ways to make the world feel a lot more immersive in the isekai series you're creating. First of all, you want to create characters that are unique and interesting to your isekai world. So consider various character types in your world or various character classes that are unique to the isekai world you're creating. You also want to create interesting cities and locations. It can be really helpful if you create a map of your isekai world and mark the most interesting and important locations to discover. I actually also recommend making sure that each location is distinct from each other on your map. So when your character is visiting a new location, try to make sure that this location looks and feels different than the other places they have explored, and this will create a sense of exploration for your readers and your characters too. You also want to create unique plants and animals in your isekai world. Consider the animals and the plants in your world and how those animals or plants may have adapted to survive in your unique isekai world. You don't need to make it a completely unique world, but you do want to make it feel at least somewhat different to the real world that we and your characters likely experience. If you need any help with this at all, please consider checking out my Worldbuilding Mastery workbook available on my website. It has everything you need to know in order to create an incredible world for your story. It's also really important to create believable characters and concepts. Despite being in another world, the characters within it still need to feel believable. They need to feel like actually real people who would make real and genuine decisions. No matter how different the isekai world may be from our world, it's important to make sure that the characters make decisions that still feel believable. So here is a couple of examples. An elf character might be self-conscious about their ears. A character gets lost in an RPG dungeon after they misplace their map. There might be a fairy who wants to be friends with the main character but is too shy to talk with them. Despite the fact that these are taking place in an isekai world with mostly fantasy characters, all of these examples show how you can create believable concepts in fictional and fantasy characters. And this is something I recommend you do with your isekai series. Try to make your characters feel genuine by putting believable concepts in your isekai series. You also want to know the teleportation process. From your character being in the real world to being transported into the isekai world, how does this teleportation process take place? Now typically there are three main ways the character may be transported from the real world into the isekai world, and of course while these three ways may look different depending on the series, these are just some general examples. So the first main way you would typically see is reincarnation. The main teleportation method is typically when the protagonist somehow dies in the real world and then is reborn into the isekai world, and this will be the most common example that you will see in a lot of isekai series. There is also a portal technique where the character finds something which acts as a portal that teleports them into the isekai world. A very common example of this is video game isekai, where the character is playing a game and suddenly finds themselves in the world of the game. And then of course you have parallel worlds, so you may avoid teleportation, but instead have the real world and the isekai world exist alongside each other and some way of the character traveling between them. In many cases as well, this might also be it, but the character might end up being stuck in the isekai world somehow. So these are the three main methods that your character may be transported into the isekai world. So I recommend checking out your favorite isekai series and thinking about how these methods fit into those series, and you can sort of see how these techniques can be changed in various ways in order to show how your character is transported into the isekai world. So let's take a look now at how to plan your isekai story. For this method, we will be using the Kishoten Ketsu style, which is a Japanese writing structure which is commonly used in writing Japanese manga or light novels. So to help you with this, let's look at how these different stages of the structure will typically be applied to isekai stories. So the character is in the real world in the introduction, but then suddenly an event occurs which transports them into the isekai world. Once they find themselves in the isekai world, usually an event will occur that forces them to take action really quickly. For example, they will appear in the isekai in the midst of a really challenging time, and now that they are here, they will usually be the only one who is able to fix it. Usually their knowledge of the real world will also come into play here, and usually that knowledge that they have, that they've taken from the real world, will help them in some way in the isekai world to solve this challenging problem or challenging time. Next is sho, which is development. Now, with this new goal that they have likely been forced into in the story, they will likely need to rely on characters within the isekai world to help. Usually the development will be broken down into arcs. These include a problem, the training, an unexpected challenge, and the result. It's sort of like a mini story within the bigger story. So these are like arcs. You want to focus on these arcs and repeat this storyline until you feel your character has enough skills and enough experience in order to reach the next part of the story, which is 10, the twist. The twist will usually occur later in the story, and this is a major story event which all the other events of the story have been leading up to. This will usually come in the form of an unexpected event which will surprise both the characters and the audience. New information is revealed which twists the events of the story. And finally, ketsu is the resolution. In the resolution, all parts of the story reach a conclusion and the story comes to an end. So this is the Kishoten Ketsu structure, which is most commonly used in writing Japanese manga or light novels, and applying this technique to creating your isekai story can also be very helpful. If you need any help with this, I also have a free Kishoten Ketsu planner available on my website. The link is in the description box down below. So when it comes to creating your isekai series, one of the most important elements is your characters. You want to ensure your characters feel really unique in your isekai world. These characters will likely help to drive the story, making the goals feel more important, and making the situations in the story feel a lot more dire. When your audience cares about your characters, any events that those characters are experiencing will feel a lot more important. When you're creating the characters in your isekai world, I recommend trying to incorporate the lore of your world into the characters. Try and create unique character types and unique character classes which help to really show that world building within the characters themselves. I also recommend trying to develop characters that are unique to your isekai world. While you can include characters like elves, goblins, or orcs, I do recommend trying to think outside of that and creating character types that are completely unique to the world you're creating, and this will create even more unique characters in your world. If you need any help with this, you could try and combine the attributes you like in already existing fantasy character types and creating new characters within your world. Give them a unique name and unique lore in the world of your story. Now, as well as this, once you have a good amount of characters that are unique to your isekai world, you also want to build friendships. Despite your character's differences, a major element to creating a good isekai is showing how your character builds friendships along the way. Now, of course, this also depends on genre. There might be some genres that will not focus as much on the power of friendship, but there are series that will focus on this, and in many cases, it's about your character finding a sense of belonging in the isekai world. Usually in the real world, they might struggle to find that belonging, but once they're in the isekai world, they find friends that they can really get to know and slowly find a place that they feel like they can belong in the isekai world. No matter where these characters came from or who they were at the start, it's important to show how these friendships grow over the course of the story. Now, if it applies to your isekai story, it's also helpful to develop a power system. Many isekai series have power systems, but of course you don't need to have this, especially if you're creating more of a slice of life isekai where there's not actually any fighting involved. But if you are planning on having characters using magical powers and abilities, then developing a power system can be really helpful. Here are some things that you can include in your power system to make it more interesting in your story. First of all, you want to consider the power origin. Show how the powers originated in your isekai world. Were the powers always there from the beginning in your world, or did characters need to unlock these abilities in some unique way? You also want to divide the powers into power categories. This could be based off specific types of powers or specific ranks or levels of powers. Just consider how you can break your power system down into categories so that it's easier to present the powers in your story. You also want to think about the power abilities. Write down the major abilities that exist in your power system, and from there you could break it down further, kind of creating like a skill tree in your power system where you show how certain abilities are developed over the course of your story. This goes into power progression, where if applicable, show how your characters can level up in their abilities and develop new powers over the course of your story. And finally, you also want to set the stakes high. Being in an isekai world usually comes with really high stakes, and usually the fate of this isekai world will be in your character's hands. The isekai world will likely have much of its own conflicts and problems, and with the knowledge your protagonist has from the real world, they will likely be the one responsible for fixing it. Or maybe your protagonist ends up being the villain and decides to try and shape the isekai world for their own gain. Whether your isekai protagonist becomes the hero or the villain, it is up to you as the author to decide. There is so much room for creative freedom in isekai, and so many potentially unique worlds that you can create. Thank you so much for joining me in today's video. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please let me know in the comment section down below. Let me know what kind of isekai series or worlds you're creating, because I would love to hear about it, and I'm sure other people would love to hear about it too. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!